All right, what does Paddy Pimblett do next? Because we know what happened on Saturday night. The man looked phenomenal. He looked really good. He showed that he had the things that I'm sure a lot of his haters didn't think he had. He went out and showed they had grit, determination. The man can take a shot. Scousers don't get knocked out after all. Whatever you want to say.
That is what every coach looks for in a fight.
Yes, there's technical things that he could have done differently. And we'll get...
Paddy Pimblett's career just hit a brick wall at UFC 296, and the footage is absolutely brutal. We're talking about a fighter who walked into that octagon with championship dreams and walked out looking like he'd been through a meat grinder. Against Justin Gaethje, Pimblett didn't just lose a fight. He got systematically dismantled, dropped repeatedly. His face turned into a crimson mess that had people questioning whether he belonged in the same cage as elite competition. This wasn't your typical tough loss, where you can point to a few adjustments and move forward. This was a complete exposure of fundamental flaws that have people wondering if his title aspirations just died a violent death on live television.
That in just a second, and we're going to talk about what he needs to do to tighten things up.
I fight next, if you ask me, but as I said,
we saw was a man that didn't want to give up, a man that could take a beating, hammer and a nail. It's all well and good when you're submitting King Green. It's all well and good when you're beating the shit out of Michael Chandler. But what happened?
You are dropped many times.
Back to your corner and you're black and blue and your face is pouring with blood like me after Anderson Silva in round 3, right? What? That the man is not the type of guy to give up on himself. He's got the heart.
But here's where this gets really interesting, and why everyone's talking about what comes next. Pimblett's response after taking that beating reveals everything about his mindset and why this story is far from over. While blood was still streaming down his face, while his corner was trying to patch him up, this guy is talking about becoming world champion. Not just competing, not just bouncing back, world champion. The disconnect between what we just witnessed and what he's claiming is either the mark of a delusional fighter or someone with the kind of unbreakable spirit that champions are made of. And honestly, the way he absorbed punishment that would have broken lesser fighters suggests there's something special brewing under all that damage.
I said, wow, you proved how tough you are. And he was like, listen, I know how tough I am.
Out here striving to prove I am tough.
I know how tough I am anyway. I don't need to prove it to anyone. I wanted to leave.
He's the one man I'd rather lose to.
That really got my respect, because that's what a fighter is meant to be. It's like,
all are tough. Every fighter in the U.
Now let's break down what actually went wrong, because the technical breakdown is where this gets absolutely wild. Pimblett was fighting with his chin raised like he was posing for a photo shoot, hands dropped like he was at a sparring session with his little brother. Some fans tried to defend it as his style, but anyone with real fight knowledge could see this was a disaster waiting to happen. This wasn't some calculated risk or strategic choice. This was fundamental boxing negligence that turned him into a walking target. Every exchange became an invitation for Gaethje to land clean shots, and Gaethje, being the savage that he is, accepted every single invitation with interest.
We're all tough, okay? We can all take a shot, well, most...
Truth. Right? If you're...
damn well need to be tough.
The punishment Pimblett absorbed throughout that fight was honestly hard to watch. We're talking about clean shots that superior defensive technique would have made impossible to land. Sure, he showed incredible heart by eating those bombs and staying upright, but here's the thing: nobody's talking about the goal in fighting isn't to showcase your ability to absorb damage. It's to inflict damage while avoiding it yourself. Fighting with those defensive holes doesn't just lose you rounds. It accumulates unnecessary trauma that can shorten careers and affect your ability to perform at the highest level. And at 31 years old, Pimblett can't afford to keep playing this dangerous game of human punching bag.
However,
things I wasn't happy with once the brawl began.
He came out with his chin up and his hands low.
And I see it, right? You know?
That's what some people said. That's the way he fights. That's his style, and he gets away with it, and all the rest.
But the striking issues are just the beginning of Pimblett's problems, and this is where the analysis gets really concerning. His wrestling deficiencies became glaringly obvious every time the fight hit the clinch. Instead of fighting for position and control, he'd immediately drop to his back, relying on his jiu-jitsu skills to save him. While his ground game is legitimately impressive, we've seen him pull off spectacular flying triangles and opportunistic submissions. It's almost entirely defensive and reactive. Wrestling, on the other hand, is about imposing your will, dictating where the fight takes place, and controlling the pace. Gaethje recognized this weakness immediately and exploited it ruthlessly, dragging Pimblett into front headlocks and controlling positions where his jiu-jitsu became irrelevant.
Wasn't crowned champion.
Just a few little minor tweaks like tucking the chin, lifting the hands a little bit, using more feints and being more like a boxer, mixing up the arts of Thai boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, but doing it as a boxer, moving and grooving, shaking.
Here's what's really crazy about this whole situation, and why some people think Pimblett's team failed him completely. His coaches at Team Kayaban have openly admitted they don't focus heavily on traditional wrestling training, preferring to work on MMA, grappling, and jiu-jitsu instead. That might work against lower-level competition, but against elite fighters who can wrestle at the highest level, it's a recipe for exactly what we witnessed against Gaethje. This isn't just a minor technical adjustment we're talking about. This is a fundamental gap in his skill set that every top lightweight is going to exploit until he addresses it. And here's the kicker. At his age and with his current training philosophy, making these changes isn't going to be easy or quick.
They don't know what they're talking about. Did this for 20-odd years, guys. I know a little bit about it. Another thing that he has to do, they got to bring in some wrestlers, man, right? The entire team at Next Gen, and this is not me talking crap about Next Generation. They're a tremendous team and they are producing a lot of great athletes. But I spoke to Luke Riley and Shem Rock and they said they don't really do wrestling practices. Again, I am not talking shit. I swear to you, it's just a suggestion. They do MMA, jiu-jitsu, grappling, okay? What we saw with Paddy and Justin was every time they clinched up against the fence, they would lean up against the fence and then Paddy would...
But wait, here's where this story takes an unexpected turn that has everyone reconsidering what they just witnessed. Despite all the technical flaws, despite getting dropped and bloodied, Pimblett never broke. He never stopped coming forward, never stopped believing he could turn the fight around, and never gave up until that final bell rang after 5 grueling rounds. In a sport where mental toughness often matters more than technical perfection, that kind of warrior spirit is incredibly rare and valuable. When reporters praised his durability after the fight, he immediately corrected them, making it clear that his goal isn't to be durable, it's to be champion. That response tells you everything about his mindset and why counting him out might be premature.
MMA, jiu-jitsu, grappling, okay? What we saw with Paddy and Justin was every time they clinched up against the fence, they would lean up against the fence, and then Paddy would kind of relax and he would kind of rest. And that's the jiu-jitsu in him, because jiu-jitsu quite literally means the gentle art. You use your opponent's strength and power against them, okay? You use their momentum, okay? It's a highly technical sport. Wrestling also is a highly technical sport, but you ain't relying on them. You are forcing the situation, and it's 100% effort and snapping them down. We saw it every time Justin Gaethje would get him in the front headlock, snap him down to the ground, start pummeling.
And let's be real about the level of competition he just faced, because context matters here. Justin Gaethje isn't some random contender. He's a former interim champion who's knocked out some of the most dangerous fighters in the division. The fact that Pimblett lasted 5 full rounds against someone of Gaethje's caliber, while taking his best shots and never going down for good, actually says something significant about his place in the division. This wasn't a career-ending beatdown against a journeyman. This was a learning experience against one of the absolute best, and surviving that kind of test while showing heart puts him in a very different category than people initially thought.
And he will fight again, but who is he going to fight next? Well, when you look at it, Ilia Topuria, what the hell is going on? I know the man's going through, and I ain't talking crap, big fan of Ilia. He's going through a personal situation, he's getting divorced and custody battles and stuff like that, right? Okay? But the man's going to fight at some point. He fought in summer last year, okay? He's not injured. I saw he was in the gym recently. The rightful fight that needs to take place is Justin Gaethje versus Ilia Topuria, right? That fight needs to happen, hopefully at the White House. Outside of that, we got Arman Tsarukyan. But Paddy ain't going to fight Arman Tsarukyan. Even though they got beef and even though Arman would love to get his hands on him, I really wouldn't suggest that right now. That's not...
So what's next for Pimblett? And this is where things get really intriguing from a matchmaking perspective. The lightweight division is absolutely stacked right now, with most of the top contenders either booked or dealing with their own situations. Islam Makhachev is the champion and likely facing Arman Tsarukyan next. Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway are fighting for the BMF belt in March. Dustin Poirier is dealing with his own career decisions. This actually creates a perfect opportunity for Pimblett to get a high-profile fight that makes sense for his trajectory. And there's one matchup that's been brewing for months that could be absolutely explosive.
Again, not talking shit before all you Paddy fans come at me, right?
Victory or defeat, Dan Hooker
Is probably going to be Paddy Pimblett's next opponent. We saw that these two, they went crazy. Said that joke that I defended because it was a joke, but a lot of people didn't see it that way. A lot of people said that he shouldn't talk. I do get that. Me and Paddy spoke about this on the interview that we did last week. If you haven't seen it, it's on the channel. Check it out, right? There's a lot of beef between these two, and it would be a stylistically fun fight. And in the Paramount era, we want fun fights.
Dan Hooker versus Paddy Pimblett is the fight that makes perfect sense on every level. And here's why this could be the most entertaining scrap of the year. Hooker is ranked 6th, just one spot above Pimblett's current 5th ranking, so the stakes are legitimate. But beyond the rankings, these two have genuine animosity stemming from previous interactions and comments they've made about each other. This isn't just a fight for position, it's personal, and personal fights always deliver the kind of drama that fans crave. Both guys are known for putting on entertaining fights. Both have excellent finishing ability, and both desperately need a statement win to stay relevant in this incredibly competitive division. The stylistic matchup between Pimblett and Hooker is fascinating when you break it down. Hooker is a long, rangy striker who likes to work at distance and pick his shots carefully. Pimblett is more of a pressure fighter who wants to get close and create scrambles where his grappling can take over. The question becomes whether Pimblett can implement the defensive improvements he desperately needs, or if Hooker's more technical striking will expose the same flaws that Gaethje exploited. For Pimblett, this represents the perfect test to show he's learned from the Gaethje experience without throwing him back to the wolves against someone completely out of his league. There's also the business side of this equation that makes this fight incredibly appealing to the UFC. Pimblett still has a massive fan base, especially in the UK, and his fights consistently draw big numbers on social media and television. Hooker brings his own following from New Zealand and has been involved in some of the most memorable wars in recent lightweight history. From a promotional standpoint, this fight practically sells itself, and in an era where the UFC is constantly looking for compelling narratives, the bad blood between these two creates built-in drama that doesn't require manufactured hype. But here's what nobody's talking about, and this could completely change how we view Pimblett's future in the division. His performance against Gaethje, while clearly a loss, might have actually elevated his stock in ways that aren't immediately obvious. He proved he can hang with elite competition for 5 full rounds. He showed incredible heart under extreme adversity, and he demonstrated that his finishing ability is legitimate even against high-level opposition. Sometimes in MMA, a great loss can be more valuable than a boring win, and Pimblett's war with Gaethje might have established him as must-see television regardless of the outcome. The real question moving forward isn't whether Pimblett can bounce back from this loss. It's whether he can make the necessary adjustments to compete with the absolute elite of the division. His team needs to address the defensive striking issues immediately, and they need to incorporate serious wrestling training into his camp preparation. These aren't minor tweaks we're talking about. These are fundamental changes to his approach that will determine whether he becomes a legitimate title contender or remains a fan-favorite gatekeeper who puts on entertaining fights but falls short against the very best. Looking at the bigger picture, Pimblett's career is at a fascinating crossroads that could go in multiple directions. He's 31 years old, which isn't ancient in MMA terms, but it's old enough that he can't afford to spend years fixing fundamental flaws. The lightweight division moves fast, with new contenders emerging constantly, and staying relevant requires consistent high-level performances. His next fight becomes absolutely crucial. An impressive win against someone like Hooker puts him back in the title conversation, while another loss might relegate him to the role of entertaining veteran who fights other entertaining veterans without championship implications. Here's the thing that makes Pimblett's situation so compelling, and why this story is far from over. In a division filled with incredible athletes and technical masters, there's still something to be said for the kind of warrior spirit and finishing ability he possesses. Champions aren't just made from perfect technique, they're forged from the ability to overcome adversity, to dig deep when everything goes wrong, and to never accept defeat even when facing seemingly impossible odds. Pimblett demonstrated all of those qualities against Gaethje, and while the technical issues are concerning, that kind of heart can't be taught. So here's where we stand, and this is what makes his next move so critical for his entire career trajectory. Pimblett's performance against Gaethje was simultaneously a devastating loss and a moral victory that revealed both his limitations and his potential. He walked out of that octagon with his face bloodied but his spirit intact, his flaws exposed but his heart proven beyond question. The path forward is clear but incredibly challenging. Fix the defensive striking, improve the wrestling, and prove that the lessons learned from getting beaten up by one of the best can translate into victories against elite competition. This isn't a career ruined, but a career redefined, and how he responds to this adversity will determine whether we remember him as a could-have-been or a champion. The bottom line is this: Paddy Pimblett versus Dan Hooker is the fight that needs to happen next, and it's the perfect measuring stick for where his career goes from here. Both fighters need a statement win, both bring legitimate skills and entertainment value, and the personal animosity guarantees fireworks from the opening bell. This isn't about bouncing back from adversity. It's about proving that the heart he showed against Gaethje can be combined with the technical improvements he desperately needs to become a legitimate force in the most competitive division in MMA. So what do you think? Is Pimblett's warrior spirit enough to overcome his technical deficiencies? Or will the elite competition at lightweight continue to expose his flaws? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if this breakdown helped you understand what really happened in that Gaethje fight. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because the lightweight division is about to get even crazier. I'll see you in the next one. And speaking of getting crazier, there's another angle to this whole Pimblett situation that absolutely nobody is discussing, and it might be the most important factor in determining his future success. The psychological impact of taking that level of punishment against Gaethje could go one of two ways. It either breaks fighters completely, making them gun-shy and hesitant in future fights, or it removes the fear of getting hurt and allows them to fight with complete freedom. Based on his post-fight interviews and social media presence, Pimblett seems to be leaning heavily toward the second option, and that could make him exponentially more dangerous moving forward. Think about it from this perspective. Every fighter has that moment of doubt in the back of their mind about what happens when they face someone who can really hurt them. Pimblett just spent 25 minutes finding out exactly what that feels like, and he not only survived it but came out the other side still talking about championship gold. That kind of experience, as brutal as it was to watch, might have actually unlocked something in his fighting psyche that wasn't there before. When you've already been to hell and walked out under your own power, there's a certain fearlessness that comes with knowing you can handle whatever anyone else brings to the table. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, and this is something that casual fans completely missed during all the coverage of his defensive lapses. Pimblett's offensive output in that Gaethje fight was actually incredibly impressive, especially considering the punishment he was absorbing. He was consistently finding openings, landing clean shots of his own, and creating submission opportunities even while getting battered. The problem wasn't his inability to compete at that level. It was his willingness to trade unnecessarily instead of making Gaethje work for his shots. That's a fixable problem, and when you combine his proven offensive skills with improved defensive awareness, you're looking at a completely different fighter. The technical breakdown everyone's focusing on is missing the forest for the trees, and this is why context matters so much in fight analysis. Yes, his chin was high and his hands were low, but he was also pressuring one of the most dangerous counterpunchers in the division and consistently putting himself in positions to land fight-ending shots. The defensive issues are glaring and need to be addressed, but they shouldn't overshadow the fact that he was competitive in every single round against a former interim champion. How many fighters in the top 15 can honestly say they'd fare better under the same circumstances? Let's talk about something that's been completely overlooked in all the post-fight analysis: the cardio advantage that Pimblett displayed throughout those 5 rounds. While Gaethje was visibly slowing down in the championship rounds, Pimblett was still pressing forward, still throwing combinations, and still hunting for finishes. That kind of conditioning at the elite level is a massive weapon, especially in a division where so many fights are decided by who can maintain their pace when fatigue sets in. If he can clean up his defensive technique while maintaining that relentless pressure, he becomes a nightmare matchup for anyone in the division. Here's what's really wild about the current lightweight landscape, and why Pimblett's timing might actually be perfect despite the loss. The division is experiencing a bit of a transition period, with several longtime contenders either moving up in weight, considering retirement, or dealing with injuries. Conor McGregor's return remains uncertain. Dustin Poirier is contemplating his future, and Tony Ferguson is clearly past his prime. This creates opportunities for fighters like Pimblett to establish themselves among the elite, without having to navigate through quite as many legends and former champions as previous generations faced. The Dan Hooker fight makes even more sense when you consider their respective career trajectories and what each fighter brings to the table stylistically. Hooker's recent performances have been inconsistent. He looked fantastic against Jalen Turner, but struggled against Matthews Gamrot's wrestling-heavy approach. Pimblett's grappling credentials could pose serious problems for Hooker if he can avoid getting picked apart on the feet. And Hooker's tendency to get drawn into wars plays directly into Pimblett's strengths as a pressure fighter who thrives in chaotic exchanges. But there's a deeper strategic element to this potential matchup that goes beyond just stylistic considerations. Both fighters are at crucial points in their careers where another loss to a ranked opponent could seriously damage their title aspirations. That kind of desperation often produces the best fights, because both men know they can't afford to play it safe or rely on decision victories. When careers are on the line, fighters tend to empty their tanks completely, and that's exactly the kind of environment where Pimblett's finishing ability and never-say-die attitude become most valuable. The promotional aspect of this fight can't be understated either, and this is where the UFC's business interests align perfectly with compelling matchmaking. Pimblett's fanbase remained incredibly loyal even after the Gaethje loss, with his social media engagement actually increasing in the days following the fight. Fans appreciate authenticity and heart, and his willingness to face elite competition while staying true to his aggressive style has only endeared him further to the audience. A victory over someone like Hooker wouldn't just be a career-defining win. It would be a statement that heart and determination can overcome technical deficiencies when combined with the right game plan. There's also the international appeal factor that makes this fight incredibly attractive from a global perspective. Pimblett brings the entire UK market with him every time he competes, while Hooker has a dedicated following throughout Australia and New Zealand. The UFC has been increasingly focused on building international stars who can headline events in different markets, and both of these fighters have proven they can draw significant audiences in their respective regions. A fight between them wouldn't just be about divisional rankings. It would be about establishing the next international star in the lightweight division. Here's something that might surprise people about Pimblett's actual skill level, and this gets lost in all the discussion about his defensive lapses. His submission game is legitimately world-class, with multiple highlight reel finishes that demonstrate not just technical proficiency, but also the kind of opportunistic instincts that separate good grapplers from great ones. Against Gaethje, even while getting battered on the feet, he was consistently threatening with submission attempts that forced Gaethje to respect his ground game. That's a rare combination, the ability to hurt people standing up while also being a constant submission threat. And it's exactly the kind of skill set that can cause problems for anyone in the division. The mental warfare aspect of a Pimblett versus Hooker fight would be absolutely fascinating to watch unfold. Both fighters are known for their psychological games and ability to get under opponents' skin, but they approach it from completely different angles. Pimblett uses humor and confidence to unsettle his opponents, while Hooker relies more on quiet intensity and calculated aggression. The build-up to their fight would be must-see television, with genuine animosity driving compelling storylines that write themselves. When fighters genuinely dislike each other, it adds an extra layer of violence and urgency that casual fans can sense immediately. Looking at the bigger picture of where the lightweight division is headed, Pimblett's role becomes even more significant. The UFC needs stars who can carry pay-per-view events and generate mainstream interest, and despite his recent loss, Pimblett has consistently proven he can do both. His fights are appointment television, his press conferences are entertaining, and his personality transcends the sport in ways that traditional martial artists sometimes struggle to achieve. That combination of entertainment value and legitimate skills makes him incredibly valuable to the promotion, regardless of whether he ever captures championship gold. But here's the reality check that every Pimblett fan needs to understand, and this is where expectations need to be managed appropriately. The path to a lightweight title shot runs through killers like Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira, and Arman Tsarukyan, fighters who combine elite-level technique with championship experience and proven ability to perform under the brightest lights. Pimblett's heart and finishing ability are valuable assets, but they need to be supported by fundamental improvements in areas where he's been consistently exploited. The question isn't whether he has the potential to compete at that level. The question is whether he has enough time and the right training environment to make the necessary adjustments.